Please welcome the Chief Executive Officer of the American Association for Cancer Research, Dr. Margaret Foti.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the 61,000 members of the American Association for Cancer Research who reside and work in 145 countries, I have the great honor to welcome you, all of you who are here in person, and those who are joining us virtually from across the country and around the world for this very special congressional briefing to unveil the landmark AACR Pediatric Cancer Progress Report. I would say at the outset that we usually attract hundreds of people online, so we're absolutely thrilled that we are doing this today, and we have several important guests. My name is Marge Foti, and I have the privilege of serving as the CEO of AACR, and I just wanted to let you know that we were founded in 1907, and we're the first and largest organization in the world dedicated to accelerating advances against cancer through high-impact cancer science and medicine. Today marks an important milestone for the cancer medicine and science community as AACR releases its first-of-its-kind progress report devoted entirely to pediatric cancer. This comprehensive report reflects years of scientific achievement, the unwavering dedication of clinicians and researchers, and the extraordinary strength of the patients and their families whose experiences give purpose to our work. The report also highlights the impact of sustained bipartisan support from Congress, which has enabled breakthroughs against cancer that are transforming clinical outcomes for so many young patients with cancer. Thanks to decades of federally supported research, the trajectory of pediatric cancer has changed in profound and measurable ways. The 5-year relative survival rate for all pediatric cancers now exceeds 85%, a milestone that reflects the impact of scientific discovery and the commitment from Congress to prioritize funding for the National Institutes of Health and the National Cancer Institute. Children with cancer who once had no treatment options now have access to targeted therapies and immunotherapies, and these are saving lives. At the same time, advances in comprehensive molecular profiling are helping physicians to diagnose cancers with greater precision, identify inherited risks, and guide therapy that is tailored to each child's cancer. These achievements reflect what has been accomplished when scientific innovation and federal investments are working together to accelerate advances against cancer. Progress can only be driven by the dedicated leaders of the pediatric cancer community, whether they be scientists or advocacy community, many of whom are with us today to celebrate this progress. We deeply appreciate their sustained interactions with Congress, which over the past 2 decades have helped to foster policies that strengthen research and improve care for pediatric cancer patients. Please join me in recognizing the pediatric cancer advocacy community that is so important to progress. Thank you. Thank you. As the report underscores, even though this remarkable progress has transformed the care of certain pediatric cancers, treatments for many others have not fundamentally changed in more than 4 decades. For survivors of pediatric cancer, now numbering more than 500,000 in the United States alone, the challenges do not end there. These survivors often face serious and lifelong effects from their treatment that can have an adverse effect on their physical health, cognitive development, fertility, emotional well-being, and overall quality of life. And in many rural areas within the United States, as well as low and middle income countries around the world, access to cancer care for many children is minimal, including access to even the most basic diagnostic tools and essential therapies. If we are to reduce these cancer disparities, it will require all of us to care about all populations around the world, all populations of pediatric cancer patients, to advocate for increased research investments. These challenges make clear that the current funding levels are not meeting the moment, Pediatric cancer research receives only a small fraction of overall federal cancer research funding, leaving gaps that slow discovery, limit innovation, and hold back progress for children with cancer. Stronger investment is essential to deliver the next generation of treatments, improve survivorship care, and ensure that every child has access to the advances they deserve. This is why pediatric cancer research must be treated as a national priority. To this end, we very much appreciate the current administration's recent executive order to prioritize the harnessing of American artificial intelligence innovation to maximize cures for pediatric cancer, as well as the administration's actions to significantly increase funding for the NCI Childhood Cancer Data Initiative, CCDI. The CCDI is essential to maximize the quantity and quality of all data collected on pediatric cancer, to enhance research capabilities, and to identify and address potential disparities. We are so very excited to be joined today by a vital member of the administration at NCI, Dr. Tony Latai, who was appointed as director of the NCI just September 29. Thank you very much, Dr. Latai, for being here. We will hear from him in a little while, but I just wanted to state at the outset how thrilled we are to have this new NCI director here with us today. Now, at the heart of this report are the experiences of cancer survivors and their families who kindly shared their stories. Their stories and resilience, including those in this room, remind us of why progress matters and why scientific discovery must continue with a sense of urgency and purpose. Every breakthrough represents time gained for these cancer patients who are so very young, hope renewed, and the possibility of a childhood preserved and a future restored. The inaugural AACR Pediatric Cancer Progress Report is both a celebration of how far we have come and a clear call to action for what still needs to be done. Continued bipartisan support for medical research, combined with strong collaboration across academia, government, industry, and the advocacy community, is essential to shaping a future where every child and adolescent with cancer has access to most advanced and effective care. I'm wondering whether the congressman is here. Thank you very much. Such progress depends on leaders who understand what is at stake for children and their families. Representative Michael McCall of Texas has long been one of these visionary leaders. As founder and co-chair of the Childhood Cancer Caucus, he has championed landmark legislation and strengthened the national government's commitment to ending pediatric cancer, such as the Michaela Nalon Give Kids a Chance Act, which just passed the House unanimously on Monday to accelerate pediatric cancer treatments and expand access to life-saving therapies for children battling childhood cancer and other rare diseases. Today, we call on the Senate to take up this legislation quickly and send it to the President for his signature. Clearly, Representative McCall's extraordinary leadership has changed what is possible for pediatric cancer research and for the families who depend on scientific progress to save the lives of their children. We are so honored to feature him in this inaugural AACR Pediatric Cancer Report, and it is now my great pleasure to welcome Representative McCall to the podium to offer his remarks.
Thanks for having me.
Means a lot.
It means a lot to me, too. Well, thank you for that introduction, and it's great to be here today with good news. We get bad news on children who have died from this horrible disease, but this week we passed unanimously the childhood cancer bill, the Michaela Nalon Give Kids a Chance Act, unanimously on the floor, and we hope for your advocacy here in the Senate. I'll be talking to Mark Wayne Mullen, who's a sponsor of the legislation on the Senate side. But if I can kind of take you back, how did I get here? I've been here for 22 years. Some people would say that's too long. I chaired the Homeland Security Committee. I chaired the Foreign Affairs Committee. But chairing the Childhood Cancer Caucus was really a highlight for me. 20 years ago, I had a lot of parents of children who either survived or died from this horrid disease. And I remember my best friend in fourth grade came down with leukemia. And I noticed his hair was falling out. And the next thing I knew, I was at his funeral. And I really didn't understand what happened. At 12 years old, you don't understand why one of your best friends died. And that really stuck with me for my lifetime. And so when the parents and the advocates came to me, I said, I want to make a difference. And what I've tried to do is protect vulnerables, whether it be the people of Ukraine and the children being abducted in Ukraine from the Russians, to any aggression in the world against, it's good versus evil, and evil here is cancer. I love MD Anderson's quote of making cancer history, and that's our goal. My wife serves on the board at MD Anderson, was responsible. It was really her idea 15 years ago why do we have to have competition between Texas Children's and MD Anderson on childhood cancer treatment? Why can't we collaborate these two great institutions together? And proud to say that's what we've done. Now, in the case of Michaela, I have an annual childhood cancer summit. And, after 16 years, I can always tell when one of the kids is not looking really very good. Then I talked to her mother and I said, I just see that look in her eye. Michaela, she's a beautiful child, but there's something, I can tell that she's not feeling well. And we got her in a clinical trial at MD Anderson and Texas Children's, but unfortunately 3 weeks later, she was on a ventilator and she passed away. And so we put the bill in her honor. So part of her legacy, I sent a video to her on her deathbed stating that, thank you for coming to Washington, and that it was not for naught, that, you will have a legacy here, and it's going to be this bill that will pass in your name. And that was really a cool thing to do, but it was really sad to lose her. And we've seen so many that have not made it, but we've also, as the years have gone by, over 16 years, seen a lot more who have survived. And unlike, my childhood when my best friend died from leukemia, it was a death sentence. Today, it's not. There are certain forms of leukemia that still are, but many that are not a death sentence today. And we've made a lot of progress over the years. At that time, 16 years ago, the pharmaceutical companies and community, they really didn't care about the kids because there was no market incentive. They cared about adults because there was a market incentive. And, that's the way, capitalism runs. So Nancy Goodman and I collaborated on a new idea. Let's create a market incentive for pharmaceutical companies to start focusing on pediatric oncology. They called it rare orphan diseases at that time, which I thought was really insulting. I mean, a rare orphan. And to call these children rare orphans was terrible. So we did away with that terminology. And now it's about saving these children. And the Creating Hope Act that we reauthorized on the House floor this week has been made a huge difference in creating that market incentive. We've had over 60 vouchers approved, and we've had about 40 new pediatric therapies now approved by the FDA since the Creating Hope Act was first authorized into law. It expired. As you know, the government shut down. We got delayed, but we did pass a reauthorization this week. And for me, one of the coolest cases coming out of the Creating Hope Act was in my own backyard at MD Anderson, where Dr. Allison, working on CAR T immunotherapy on a childhood clinical trial, was able to get FDA approval by using the voucher system that we authorize into law. CAR T immunotherapy has gone a long ways in the treatment of cancer, not only for children, but for adults as well. And now the new thing are the natural killer cells. MD Anderson has a clinical trial. Tracy Ryan, who always speaks at our conference, has been doing a clinical trial down in Cancun because of the way, the FDA works. It's sometimes easier to get the clinical trial evidence in a different country and then present it in the United States. She just told me yesterday she's going to open up the clinical trial now in the United States, and the NK cell therapy is doing extremely well in terms of therapies on the horizon for our children. In addition to the Creating Hope Act being reauthorized, we also changed the law when it comes to multiple drug therapies. So in adults, it's okay to give them multiple drug therapies, but in children, they were treated differently. And that's my experience with this whole journey, over 20 years. Well, they treat the children different from the adults. Well, in this case, we say, no, we're going to treat the children, we're going to give them the same opportunities that adults have in terms of multi-drug therapies. And so, that passed into law. And there have been so many great victories we've had over the years. But what I was really proud of Michaela and her bill, and I wish I had the posters of her so you could see it. We'll send all of you a clip from the floor speech, but her parents were there, and I gave them a tour of the Capitol after. But what I love the most about it is in this extremely partisan time that we live in right now, it was the most bipartisan bill in this Congress with 313 co-sponsors. And I'm proud of that. And it doesn't come easy. We worked it. The best story, and I had this book I wrote called Better Angels, because these children are my army of angels. And what we decided to do, instead of like me going to a member's office, much more effective to have the children, my advocates, my angels, my army of angels advocate for the bill. Because, a member can tell me, sorry, Congressman, no, I don't want to sign up for that. But you bring in a child that either survived cancer or is currently suffering with cancer. And boy, and we have one, it looks like here in the front row, it's really hard to say no. And we found, wow, this is so effective. And it's a really cool Washington story that doesn't get out there much. But to mobilize an army of advocates of these, I call them my angels, my children, that go office to office getting co-sponsors, that's how we got 313 co-sponsors. I take really very little credit for that. I think it's, being the author, I think helped, but I think these advocates of children out there, I called Nancy, I said, what's going on, man? We had like 150 co-sponsors, and now we got 313. Like, what is going on right now? Well, we unleashed our army of advocates on the Hill. Now, how cool is that? And it does make a difference. And people think, oh, I can't make a difference in Washington. You can. And that is evidence of it. And the children are our most powerful advocates on the Hill. We've also, since that time, the Race for Children Act, which was basically this innovation in using adult treatments to be studied for use in children. 40% of all new cancer drugs are studied now in children as well. The STAR Act was boosted funding for research, which was huge. What I think is really interesting in the AI world today was we passed this database, basically a data center where we could have a national database of samples of childhood cancers, specimens. So now we have like a bank, if you will, of all this research and specimens in this database of cancers that are out there in one database. And now with AI, if you can apply AI to that information that we have, as you know, AI is a power engine to provide solutions that may take a decade of study to provide that can be done in a matter of days. And so that is the next step, working with NCI to get AI to work on this database that we have to then provide more therapies, more solutions to childhood cancer. And then the Global Hope Initiative, little Sadie was my advocate for many years. I remember taking her to the White House bill signing ceremony. She was great. I would go on television with her, like on CNN with Wolf Blitzer, and she was like a star, just a natural. She was more nervous, or I was more nervous than she was, going on national TV, and just stunning to watch her in action. But she went with me to Africa, where we have the Global Hope Initiative. Texas Children's now is in Botswana, where the mortality rate is 90% because they don't have the cures and the therapies over there. And through the Global Hope Initiative, we're changing that number because most of these cancers are very treatable. They just don't have the expertise to do so. And after we passed that bill, and Sadie and I went over to Botswana together and met with the king of Botswana, but seeing all these African children who had a death sentence on their marked for death, to see them now living because of this initiative. There's nothing more powerful for a member of Congress than to pass legislation that then saves the lives of children. And I've done a lot of my career in terms of Homeland Security, Foreign Affairs Committee, but I still, I think one of the most rewarding things I've done up here is to pass legislation that saves the lives of children. And that's what we're doing, and that's what y'all are doing. And I appreciate all of you for your support and advocacy. Let's get this passed through the Senate, get it signed into law before Christmas. I can't think of a better Christmas gift to our children than having this bill on the president's desk. And so thanks for having me. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for your advocacy. And God bless all of you, and Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Love it. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Representative McCall, for your inspiring comments and for your leadership and for your unwavering commitment that you bring to this important cause. I must say that your deep dive into the science of pediatric cancer therapeutics is very impressive. It's amazing, and we appreciate all that you do and all you've been working on with your wife at MD Anderson. And I'm sure that she's a wonderful person to help in this initiative. 32nd anniversary. Let's give a round of applause there. You're a hero, and you're the angel for the cause, so thank you again for everything. Okay, now I'd like to ask you to watch a brief video that brings this progress report to life through the voices and experiences of the children and families whose strength and courage remind all of us what progress really means. Thank you.
He was watching his iPad on the couch, and I can kind of tell like his words were getting a little slower. Then at that point, he just fell on the ground.
Then I just picked him up and just straight to the hospital.
We got transferred to Commerce Hospital that night. He had his biopsy, and it came back that he was positive for high-risk neuroblastoma.
We took her to the ER. They did an MRI. They found the mass in her brain.
Once we had the final diagnosis, basically they sat Chris and I down and was like, your kid has 9 to 18 months to live.
When he was 14 years old, he was feeling crummy, so I brought him to the hospital. 3 days into that, his doctors started seeing atypical cells show up, and those results came back with a very rare AML leukemia diagnosis.
In, I think, 2021 or 2022, I officially got diagnosed with a grade 2 astrocytoma in my brain.
They medically transported us to CHOP. We were doing a bunch of testing, and then 5 doctors walked in and said, we believe it's leukemia. Your life changes completely upside down in a matter of seconds.
Spring break of my sophomore year of college, I wasn't really feeling quite right. I eventually went to the Student Health Center where they could see in my blood counts that something wasn't altogether normal.
Martin was 19 when he was diagnosed, so he could either be treated as a pediatric patient or he could be treated on the adult level.
We've made a lot of progress in treating children with cancer, and we're, of course, extremely excited and proud of the progress that we've made. The fact still remains that in higher income countries, cancer is still a leading cause of death by disease in children.
What's exciting to me is that we have figured out through research that children's cancers are very different than adult cancers. And in knowing that, we appreciate that we have to look at pediatric cancer with different lenses to give us a sort of comprehensive picture of all the things that are driving that cancer.
Being told that your child has an incurable, potentially fatal disease, it was terrifying. Alex started Gomekli, which is a MEK inhibitor, in late July of this year. After the first month, we already had a reduction of 1 centimeter in his tumor, which doesn't sound like a lot, but is astronomical after 1 round of treatment. It was just amazing.
We went right in and we started intense chemotherapy. When the 3rd month came around, she still had 75.8% of leukemia still left in her bone marrow. And at that point is when Dr. Rangel said, you know, we have a very small window of opportunity here. The CAR T therapy has been less invasive. She has 0 detectable leukemia in her B cells right now from the CAR T therapy.
Tyler was on chemotherapy along with this menin inhibitor called revumenib. The only reason why Tyler is here today is because of revumenib and him being enrolled in the clinical trial.
So after the diagnosis, she actually had surgery to remove as much of the mass as they could. After they removed the mass, they came up with a care plan. And so she went through 6 weeks of radiation. Following that radiation, we essentially had a couple of options. The clinical trial that we ended up getting into, where she started making trips to Michigan about every 9 to 12 weeks.
She's been on OCT-201 and they haven't seen any recurrence or growth on her MRIs, and she's still taking it. She's been on it for 4.5, 5 years. OCT-201 has kept this demon at bay.
When I was 17, my oncology team presented me with this new drug called vorasidenib, which is supposed to slow down growth or potentially halt it entirely. I've been on it for about a year, and my neurosurgeon said it seems to be working. The growth seems to be slowing, which is really encouraging to hear, definitely.
The last thing you want to hear, that your cancer has come back. My doctor reassured me at the time that there was an option that was an immunotherapy.
Blincyto was our last chance. He had to tolerate it.
I see my doctors now about once a year. The visits are fairly boring. Being in remission, that's the biggest thing.
Epidemiologically, we understand that over the life course, there are health challenges associated with high-dose chemotherapy, radiotherapy. The ability to more precisely target with new drugs, we'll see a reduction of that long-term health burden.
He's doing great. He is thriving.
I think things have grown by leaps and bounds just over the last 10 years. And you would chalk that up to the research and all the trials with all those advancements.
To continue to accelerate the progress that we're making in childhood cancer, we need funding. Federal funding has been instrumental in advancing our understanding and our treatment of childhood cancer.
Now, thanks to the research and the government funding that we have had up until this point, we have 2 FDA-approved drugs to treat the type of tumor that can become malignant.
Funding for cancer research means, giving families and their children a fighting chance, not just for survival, though, for living a full and, a healthy life.
Ensuring that we have the proper funding and resources and people in place to support these programs is just critical. It literally saves lives.
If there was one thing that I could say to the people that are in charge of putting funding towards these kinds of things, it gives people who are going through something really difficult hope for the future.
We need the funding to keep moving forward, to keep getting to a place where you don't only have that one option.
I feel not scared anymore, and I feel a little happier.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this inspiring video. Before I comment on it, I wanted to mention that Nancy Goodman, one of the most revered patient advocates, is in the room here. Nancy, thank you very much for all you do. Thank you. The stories that we just heard underscore what scientific progress means for pediatric cancer and their families who depend on it. These stories also emphasize how vital it is for our nation to continue supporting research that drives breakthroughs against pediatric cancers. The achievements highlighted in this progress report reflect the dedication of our scientific and clinical communities and the longstanding bipartisan commitment of Congress to investing in life-saving discoveries for young patients, people like Representative McCall. The inaugural AACR Pediatric Cancer Progress Report reflects that same commitment, and it would not have been possible without the exceptional leadership of the scientists who have guided its development. It is now my privilege to introduce the chairs of the Pediatric Cancer Progress Report Steering Committee, whose expertise and dedication to this cause were instrumental in shaping the content of this important report. First, Dr. Elaine Martis serves as co-executive director of the Steve and Cindy Rasmussen Institute for Genomic Medicine at Nationwide Children's Hospital and the Rasmussen Nationwide Foundation Endowed Chair in Genomic Medicine. She is also professor of pediatrics at the Ohio State University College of Medicine and a leader in the fields of precision medicine and cancer genomics. Her research has contributed to major advances in next-generation sequencing and molecular diagnostics, including foundational efforts in efforts such as the Cancer Genome Atlas and the Pediatric Cancer Genome Project. Dr. Martis served as president of AACR from 2019 to 2020 and currently serves as one of the founding editors-in-chief of the AACR journal, Cancer Research Communications. We are very thankful for her leadership and expertise in the development of this report. And Dr. Kimberly Stegmeyer is a physician scientist and pediatric oncologist and is chair of the Department of Pediatric Oncology at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, associate chief of the Division of Hematology Oncology at Boston Children's Hospital, and the David G. Nathan Professor of Pediatrics at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Stegmeyer's research is dedicated to advancing precision pediatric oncology, pioneering the development and application of innovative genomic and chemical biology approaches to identify novel therapeutic targets and treatments for childhood cancers, particularly those driven by fusion oncoproteins. She is a past elected member of the AACR Board of Directors, as well as a former chair of the AACR Pediatric Cancer Working Group. Both of these remarkable pediatric cancer scientists have been elected as fellows of the AACR Academy for their exciting cancer discoveries. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Martis, who will then be followed by Dr. Stegmeyer. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marge. I want to begin my remarks by extending my sincerest thanks and appreciation to you, Marge, for your unwavering leadership and for commissioning this inaugural Pediatric Cancer Progress Report. I also really want to gratefully acknowledge the members of the International Steering Committee that contributed to this report for their time, their insights, and for their expertise in really pulling these topics together that describe the status of our field at this particular point in time. And finally, a special thanks to Dr. Raj Sengupta and his amazing team at AACR, who are our partners in writing this report, identifying our important patient stories that are featured in the report, and all of the topics that we cover in this important inaugural report. They really made this dream a reality for us. Finally, I wanted to thank Dr. Tony Latai, our new NCI director, for being here. Tony, we're excited for your leadership of the NCI, and we really look forward to working closely with you to address the remaining challenges that we face in the treatment of pediatric cancers, as we outline in the report. The inaugural Pediatric Cancer Progress Report concept really emerged in 2023. This was during an innovation summit that AACR sponsored that was organized by Dr. Stegmeyer and myself, as well as Katie Janeway, who's an oncologist at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. The Innovation Summit really centered around the challenges of developing therapies for pediatric-specific cancers and the challenges of getting novel therapies, once they were developed, into clinical trials. What emerged from that intense 2.5-day discussion was really one important goal, and that was publishing a standalone pediatric cancer progress report that was aimed at both celebrating the advances as well as focusing on the many challenges that remain. And so we really feel like our goal, one of our goals coming out of that Innovation Summit has now come to reality. So I'm really excited to be here to announce the publication of the report. It's highly informative and I think emphasizes the uniqueness of pediatric cancers, as I was mentioning in the video, and the resulting need to really commit more federal funding for pediatric cancer research. This investment will enable us to really harness novel drug technologies that address these cancers, many of which are out there, but we just don't have the know-how yet from a standpoint of pediatric cancer about how to engage them. From a genomics perspective, which is my area of expertise, we do know that pediatric cancers are quite different from those in adults. How? Well, first of all, they have fewer mutations than adult cancers, and they more frequently emerge from gene fusions or from changes in epigenetic proteins that alter which genes are expressed. Both of these aspects disrupt normal cell growth patterns and lead to the development of cancer. Many studies have demonstrated that accurate diagnosis of pediatric cancers can be ascertained from genomic profiling tests. And this accuracy in diagnosis has been shown to improve disease outcomes. In this regard, I'm so proud of my institute's current role in a visionary NCI-supported large-scale precision diagnostic project for pediatric and adolescent young adult cancer patients that's being conducted in collaboration with the Children's Oncology Group. This is called the Molecular Characterization Initiative, and in government you have to have lots of acronyms, so we just shorten all those 3 words to MCI. The MCI supported by the NCI. Now you can see what I live with on a daily basis. But in this important program, we have actually tested since 2022 over 6,500 pediatric patients with a return of clinical results within 21 days from receipt of their tissues. So this is really important because this rapid return of results can inform their care. We can provide information about whether a patient has high or low risk cancer. We can provide a precise classification of that cancer. And we can identify the potential use of FDA-approved therapies or the likelihood that that child could be enrolled onto a clinical trial. All of these are really important features to be included in the consideration of how best to approach that child's cancer. To be honest, our hope for this project is that, like other high-income countries in the world who have already conducted such studies, the improvement in outcomes will substantiate a federally funded initiative that provides these molecular profiling tests for every child in America. Importantly, the de-identified data from these tests already are being submitted to the NCI-administered Childhood Cancer Database Initiative that Representative McCall just mentioned a few minutes ago. And we are excited about this as well because this will enable future discoveries about these cancers and really suits the data sharing ethos that we have in pediatric cancer care already, which is incredibly important for these rare cancers to be better understood. As we present in the report, improvements in outcomes may ultimately be limited initially because there currently aren't many drugs that are exclusively targeting the altered genes that drive pediatric cancers. This stands in stark contrast to adult cancers, where there are often multiple FDA-approved therapies for a known cancer driver gene. The report addresses the need for increased federal funding of pediatric cancer research to enable identifying how novel pediatric cancer drivers lead to cancer onset, which is the first step in designing therapies that are specific for each driver gene. We also acknowledge that conventional chemo and radiotherapies are causing profound long-term side effects in patients who survive their cancers, such as a significant increase in secondary cancer diagnoses, difficulty in educational ascertainment due to neurocognitive deficits, and inability to hold steady employment. These long-term consequences will diminish as our therapies improve to better target the cancer cells, leaving normal cells alone. Another genomics-based aspect of pediatric cancer is that about 15% of children have a genetic predisposition to develop cancer. This can either be inherited or occur spontaneously, but regardless of its origin, these children have an enhanced likelihood of being diagnosed with cancer more than once over the time of their lives. Our report features Henya Lloyd-Gasho, who we'll hear from in a little bit, who has an alteration in the gene TP53, which defines the diagnosis of cancer predisposition syndrome called Li-Fraumeni syndrome. Patients with this syndrome have an 80 to 100% chance of developing cancer during their lifetimes. To identify emergent cancers, they typically are evaluated by whole body MRI at least one time per year. In our report, we describe how genomic evaluation of DNA in these patients using samples from their blood is being performed in the pursuit of even more sensitive early cancer detection than can be achieved by MRI. A single tube of blood is taken during their yearly MRI and tested for a variety of markers within the circulating DNA in the blood that gives us evidence whether new cancer is appearing. And our hope is that such early detection will result in more effective treatment and eradication of a new cancer. We also feature a second patient, Alex Owens, who was diagnosed at age 4 months with genetic predisposition syndrome called neurofibromatosis caused by a mutation in the gene NF1. Due to basic research, cancer experts have identified the activation of the MEK pathway in tumors that emerge in this predisposition setting. This important finding has led to clinical trials showing that NF1 patients benefit from a daily treatment with a MEK inhibitor therapy that reduces their tumor burden and limits the emergence of new tumors over time. Although Alex cannot attend today, we're so pleased that his mother, Diane, is here and will offer some remarks from her important perspective of advocacy in the next minute. So I'll finish by saying that we're here today to celebrate these advances while recognizing that many cancers affecting children and adolescents There may remain only limited options and a standard of care that has not changed in decades. We are here to state that we need more research investment to better understand all pediatric cancers and their development to design effective new therapies. And we need the support of the American people and our Congress to state unequivocally that improving the care and cure of our youngest cancer patients is a worthwhile investment in our future. Thanks very much.
So it's a real honor to be here. I also want to thank Dr. Foti for her deep commitment to pediatric oncology, Dr. Latai and Representative McCall for joining us today, Dr. Singupta and Zaidi and the AACR team for helping so incredibly to put this report together with us, Dr. Mardis and the Progress Report Steering Committee, and of course the patients and the families that are here with us today. As you've heard, this is the first AACR Pediatric Cancer Progress Report, and it really celebrates the progress that we've made in treating children and adolescents with cancer. But it also sounds a clear call to action. We now have the tools to make further breakthroughs, and this report outlines the next steps. Increased federal funding is essential to ensure that those next steps become reality. Why is this report so important? First, cancer remains the leading cause of death by disease in school-aged children in the US and other countries. Second, the children that we cure continue to have long-term side effects, as you will read from childhood cancer survivor Martin Townsend. Third, pediatric cancers, as you heard, are quite different from adult cancers. They're different types of cancer. They have developmental origins, and the types of gene mutations that drive them are different. This means we need research focused specifically on pediatric cancers to make progress. It is simply not enough to study adult cancer. Children are not small adults. Children with cancer are still commonly treated with old chemotherapy drugs with significant long-term side effects, as well as with surgery and radiation therapy. Our goal is to cure, but we need to balance the goal of cure with the side effects of our therapies in the context of a developing child. One area of progress has been the tailoring of treatments based on risk factors, including the molecular profile of the cancer. Profiles identified through the critical research discussed by Dr. Mardis. Here, the goal has been to decrease the doses of chemotherapy that might have long-term effects, to reduce or eliminate radiation therapy, and to add new medicines that protect against the toxicity of the chemotherapy. The last 2 decades have seen remarkable advances in understanding the molecular drivers of cancer and the development of drugs that inhibit these drivers, so-called targeted therapies. While the development of these drugs has largely focused on adult cancers, there are notable examples of successful application to pediatric cancers. I recall a child that I took care of with acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the most common cause of cancer in children. Her leukemia had unfortunately recurred through all standard therapies. Using modern genomic tests, we identified that she had an abnormality known as a kinase fusion, one that we predicted based on research would respond to a targeted drug known as imatinib. She was very sick at the time. She was in the ICU. She had multiple infections, and she was on a ventilator. But with imatinib, she went into a complete remission. There's no greater joy as a physician than to witness these moments. Over 7 years later, she remains in remission. Another example has been the development of menin inhibitors, enabled by basic science research beginning over 20 years ago, demonstrating that the menin protein was an Achilles heel in a specific type of leukemia of high relevance to children. Next was the discovery of a drug that inhibits menin, a discovery made by an academic chemist, and then many years of research studying those drugs. In 2024, the first menin inhibitor was FDA approved for children and adults with specific types of acute myeloid leukemia. This 20-year journey would not have been possible without the foundational academic research, including critical National Cancer Institute funding. Funding supports long-term research, and that supports cures. You are going to hear about Tyler Perrier's journey and the impact of menin inhibitors in eliminating his leukemia. Another major advance has been in activating the immune system to kill cancer cells. One exciting example here has been the development of T-cell therapies called CAR T-cells, where the patient's own T-cells are engineered to attack the cancer. This CAR T-cell strategy has been most successful in B-cell leukemias, a therapy that has given hope to Liana Munir and her family. In the case of a common pediatric solid tumor, neuroblastoma, antibodies have been developed to target the neuroblastoma cells, leading to immune system activation against the neuroblastoma, a critical treatment for Aidan Newman. We have also witnessed the deployment of drugs such as dordaviprone, targeting dopamine receptors, a drug which has been successfully used to treat Cayley-Ehlenfeld's diffuse midline glioma. It's an incredible privilege to take care of children and adolescents with cancer. As a pediatric oncologist and physician scientist, I've witnessed firsthand this transformation in care for some pediatric patients with cancer, but also the heartbreak when our treatments fail. There are many childhood cancers where we have not made progress improving outcomes. In fact, the targeted medicines and immune therapies that have revolutionized the care of adult cancers by and large have been less impactful in childhood cancers because the biology and the targets in pediatric cancers are frequently different. Around 50% of childhood cancer targets occur only in the pediatric cancers, and these targets are difficult to make drugs against. Because childhood cancers are rare, there is little market incentive for pharmaceutical companies to develop therapies specifically for children. That reality makes federal investment and support from private foundations essential. Without the funding, progress stalls. With it, we can continue the research that leads to new treatments and ultimately cures for these complex and life-threatening childhood cancers. We're at a crossroads. The advances in AI, in genomics, in chemistry, and structural biology have opened the door to discoveries we could not have imagined a decade ago. Discoveries that allowed a child on a ventilator who received a targeted therapy to remain, years later, cancer-free. That breakthrough was possible because research was funded. The next breakthrough will require the same commitment. To unlock the full potential of these technologies for pediatric cancers, robust federal funding is essential. These children deserve more than time. They deserve full, healthy futures. The science is ready, and we must match it with action. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Stegmeyer and Dr. Martis, for these amazing remarks and for your extraordinary leadership of this inaugural report, but also the pediatric cancer field. You know, your remarks illuminate both the progress that has transformed the care for so many young patients and also the difficult realities that too many patients continue to face. They also remind us that every step forward depends on strong and sustained support for the NIH and the NCI, whose investments in pediatric cancer research have made the current advances possible. So it is now my great honor to introduce a visionary leader whose work will help guide the future of cancer science and medicine in not only children, but also adult patients. Dr. Anthony Latai was sworn in as the 18th director of the National Cancer Institute on September 29. He brings to this role more than 2 decades of distinguished service at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Harvard Medical School, where he established himself as one of the foremost physician scientists working to understand how cancer cells survive, and how these vulnerabilities can be targeted to improve treatment. Dr. Latai is widely recognized for his pioneering research on cancer cell death pathways and for advancing approaches that are now helping guide more precise and effective therapies. He has long been a champion of the things that we love: innovation, collaboration, and scientific rigor. And he is deeply committed to ensuring that discoveries in the laboratory translate into meaningful progress for patients. As he assumes leadership of our nation's cancer research agency, Dr. Latai steps into a role that is essential to the future of pediatric cancer research and to advancing the progress against cancer for all patients. The National Cancer Institute is the driving force behind the foundational science that leads to earlier detection, more precise treatments, and better outcomes for children and adults, and cures. The findings of the Pediatric Cancer Progress Report highlight both the breakthroughs made by sustained federal investment and the significant challenges that remain, underscoring why his strong leadership at NCI is so important at this moment in time. Knowing full well of Dr. Latai's extraordinarily busy schedule in his new role at NCI, we are very grateful that he is here with us today as we reflect on the advances documented in the report and look ahead to the urgent work that must continue to save lives from pediatric cancer. Please join me in welcoming the new director of the National Cancer Institute, Dr. Anthony Latai.
Thanks, Marge. Marge didn't exactly highlight it, but I was sworn in on September 29th, and 48 hours the government shut down. So I've actually probably been at this job really something more like 2 to 3 weeks. But nonetheless, I'm very excited to join you in what Marge actually pointed out is my first public appearance as National Cancer Institute to mark the release of the first ever AACR Pediatric Cancer Progress Report. I think as director of the National Cancer Institute, my duty is to reduce the burden of cancer and deaths due to cancer across all Americans. But I think we can agree that although all cancers are bad, pediatric cancer applies a special burden, not only to the patients themselves, but also to the families and the parents surrounding those patients. As a parent myself, I can only imagine the challenges faced by parents in that situation. And you have my great sympathy and respect for the challenges that you've met and the burdens you've faced. AACR, and I'm a big fan of AACR, I think Marge knows that, has a long history of supporting childhood cancer research and bringing together experts who devote their careers to helping kids and families face these diseases. NCI values this partnership and the shared commitment behind today's event. I appreciate the contributions NCI colleagues have themselves made to the report itself and to the progress that is featured throughout. I also want to take a moment, although he's departed, to thank Congressman McCall for all that he's done to support childhood cancer research during his time in Congress. Thank you for your leadership as the founder and the co-chair of the Childhood Cancer Caucus, and for being a champion for children with cancer as the lead sponsor of the STAR Act and many other important legislative efforts. As noted in the report, President Trump signed the STAR Act into law in 2018 and launched the Childhood Cancer Data Initiative in 2019. During Childhood Cancer Awareness Month this past September, shortly after I was sworn as NCI director, the president issued, in what I believe might have been his final executive order before the shutdown, an executive order to expand the CCDI, Childhood Cancer Data Initiative, with an increased focus on artificial intelligence, AI, and childhood cancer research, and backed it up with an earmark for $50 million for this initiative. Progress has been significant in some areas in pediatric cancer, with notable increases in long-term survival that we've already noted for certain cancers and several recent drug approvals. But I think we all recognize there are still major gaps that need attention. This report helps highlight where those gaps are and why ongoing investment matters. For instance, many pediatric cancers, including several brain tumors, have seen little or no improvement in survival for decades. Too many children still have limited or highly toxic treatment options. Also, childhood and AYA survivors face serious long-term late side effects. This remains a focus of NCI STAR Act work in survivorship, biospecimen collection, and childhood cancer epidemiology. NCI also continues to prioritize difficult-to-treat childhood cancers through CCDI's molecular characterization initiative, as we've heard, and across our broader research programs. This includes basic research, preclinical testing, and clinical trials through the Children's Oncology Group, NCORP, the Early Phase Clinical Trials Network, and the Pediatric Oncology Branch of the NIH Clinical Center. As we look to the future, AI, genomics, imaging, and large-scale data integration hold promise to offer new and better ways to understand childhood cancers and to develop more precise and less toxic therapies. We at the NCI, and I personally, am grateful for the childhood cancer community and for the strong bipartisan support for Congress that drives this work. With your continued commitment, the next generation of progress is within reach. Thank you to AACR, to the patients and families here today, and to our congressional champions for the steadfast support of cancer research. I look forward to partnering with all of you to continue to advance much-needed progress for all children with cancer. And I want to make it very clear that the NCI stands committed to reducing the burden of disease from pediatric cancer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Latai. We're just thrilled that you were here today to present your comments. Thank you for your leadership. We are so deeply grateful. Your remarks really underscore why the work of the National Cancer Institute is so essential to accelerating progress against cancer and to ensuring that advances reach every patient and family who needs them. At the heart of that mission and at the heart of this first of its kind pediatric cancer progress report are the children and adolescents whose lives are shaped by this disease and whose experience give meaning to every scientific advance. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first patient-parent advocate, whose story reminds us why progress matters and why our work must continue with both purpose and urgency. Adrienne Horn is the mom of 8-year-old Liana Munier, who is thriving in second grade, loves playing outside, and is, I hear, a great chef. Liana was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia at age 6 and began CAR T-cell therapy in 2024. Adrienne is here today to share their family's journey.
Hi, how are you? My name's Adrienne. I'm Liana Munir's mother. I apologize in advance for getting emotional. About 2 years ago, our daughter Liana came home from school and she was very tired and all she wanted to do was sleep, which was very unlike her. Day after day, same thing. So later that night, I put her in the shower and I decided, let's go to bed a little bit early tonight. She looked at me and she passed out. I pulled her lifeless body out of the shower and called her dad in, and we immediately rushed her to Virtual and Voorhees. From there, she went through so many tests for the next couple days, and we were ultimately sent home. A couple more days went by, and Liana spiked a huge fever, 103. We were rushed back to Virtua, where they decided to medically transport Liana to CHOP. From there, we spent 2 weeks in hematology, while they were trying to figure out what was going on, blood transfusions, blood work. And at the end, everything came back and things were looking up. So they said that we'd be able to go home. They didn't think that it was cancer. So we went home for a couple days again. Spiked a huge fever. They wanted to send an ambulance. Her dad and I said we can get her there faster. When we got there, we spent all night in the emergency room, and then we're pulled into another room with 5 doctors, and pathology had determined that Liana did have leukemia. We were admitted to the 3rd floor for oncology, and then we spent 11 months. The first 3 months were so hard. We just wanted answers and to figure out what was going on. In the beginning, one of her doctors came to me and said, we have this option that we could harvest Liana's T cells before she gets very sick and before her body is riddled with chemotherapy. So I said, I don't care what you have to do, please do it. So we had that small window, we were able to get it. Months went by, chemo, sickness, losing hair, no answers. After the third month, we were hoping that she would have under 2% leukemia in her bone marrow. She still had over 70. So then they said, that's it, we're gonna go with CAR T. And we said, let's do it. They then took her manipulated T cells and placed them back last November into her body. And we waited and we waited. And finally, a month later, she went down to 57%. Then 2 months later, she went down to 22%. And then 5 months later, she was down to 0.001%. And today, she's at 0% detectable leukemia in her bone marrow. You know, sitting in that hospital and crying silently in the bathroom every night, praying that we would find answers if our prayers were answered. If it wasn't for the funds, honestly, the dedication of her doctors and all this research, I don't know where we would be today. The fact that CAR T therapy was an option for us is still mind-blowing. Again, if it wasn't for the research, we would still be going through chemotherapy, painful radiation. We would be going through bone marrow transplants. Once I found out, Liana may, after that, never be able to have children, which was huge in itself. I think if this was 10 years ago without the research, that wouldn't have ever been an option for her. So it's so vital that we keep the research going so that the next family knows that there's always another option, that the doctors are never going to stop trying, never going to give up, and that we need the research because it gives families hope. And most of all, on those hard days, hope is all you have to get through. Thank you.
Next, I'm really pleased to introduce Henia Lloyd-Gashko and ask him to come to the podium. Henia is a first-year civil engineering student at the University of Toronto, and we're especially grateful he's joining us during finals week. I hope that doesn't put a dent in your grade point average. He will share his extraordinary story of living with Li-Fraumeni syndrome and his 2021 diagnosis of grade 2 astrocytoma. Henia, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Martis, for that fantastic introduction. So my name is Henia Lloyd-Gashko. I'm 18. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I don't just go to school there. I also live there. And I've been, despite my diagnosis only being in 2021, living with cancer for about 10 years. So I guess to begin, in 2015, I was diagnosed with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, which is a hereditary cancer predisposition. So my grandmother had it, my father has it, my aunt had it, my sister and I have it. It's a virtual 100% chance of getting cancer throughout the lifetime, and there's also a risk of developing multiple cancers over your life. So there's a lot of really intensive monitoring that you have to undergo. There's blood tests, there's ultrasounds, there's MRIs, kind of just all the time. My first ever MRI in December of 2015, I remember it was New Year's Eve, and it was like 8 in the morning. So super fun way to spend New Year's. There was an abnormality that showed up on the brain portion of the MRI, and they didn't know what it was. They had to go in for a biopsy in 2017 that said that it was all normal, and then in 2021 or 2022, I believe, they noticed that one of the abnormalities was growing more aggressively than previously. So they went in for another biopsy, and it came back positive for grade 2 astrocytoma with IDH1 mutation. which that's a lot of words that I also didn't really know what that meant when they told me, but basically it was bad. So in 2023, I had a laser ablation, which basically just is a surgery where they go in and they zap it and see what happens. And recovery for that was really, really rough. I was back in school about a month later, but I was having difficulties with mobility, with processing. My ability to concentrate and focus and be able to be myself was just so reduced. I felt like I had lost a piece of myself. But at the time, surgery was seen as the only option for me. So after that difficult recovery, the thought of having another surgery the next summer was really, really difficult to swallow, especially considering that the locations of the other lesions were more difficult and had the higher risk of complications. But in, I think, 2023 as well, my oncologist, Dr. David Malkin, who is fantastic, and I'm so grateful for him, told us about the possibility of this IDH inhibitor called vorasidenib that was being tested here in the US. It was very exciting to hear about, but it still hadn't been approved for pediatric cases, and so it was a long wait. But in 2024, I finally got approved for it, and the thought of having the potential for a treatment that wasn't just surgery was so uplifting and really encouraged me to have hope for a slightly normal future. So just the research that doctors in the US and all over the world have done for patients worldwide is so important, and there is not a lack of passion or want for finding a cure for cancer, but you need financial support and government support. It's really important, and it does make a difference in the lives of people. Thank you so much.
So Henya, thank you so much for sharing your journey. That was really, really beautifully told. I'm now pleased to welcome Diane Owens. Diane is the mother of 13-year-old Alex Owens, who is an accomplished musician and another passionate young chef who was diagnosed with neurofibromatosis type 1 at just 4 months of age. This particular type of tumor that Alex, or the tumors that Alex Owens has, is really, I think, a great example of where a pathway actually is the same in adult cancers and in some pediatric tumors. And I think a great example of applying drugs that were developed for adult cancers to a tumor or a set of tumors occurring in children. And that's a type of drug known as a MEK inhibitor. I also want to acknowledge that Diane has been such a strong advocate with the Children's Tumor Foundation, which has been instrumental in advancing new treatments in NF1. So Diane, please come up. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Owens. I'm from Southbury, Connecticut, and I am here today because I have a 13-year-old son named Alex who has neurofibromatosis. Our story starts off similar to any young family in pure chaos. I had a 3-year-old toddler climbing kitchen cabinets. I was on my knees changing my newborn's diaper. It was December of 2012, and my house looked like Santa's workshop was a crime scene. I looked down as I held a stuffed Mickey with one hand, trying to keep my toddler from using the toaster as a step stool. And in the other hand, I held my infant and was trying to change his diaper, and I noticed some dark spots. Were they marker? Was I eating too many carrots? I don't know. It was innocuous. It didn't seem to bother him. It didn't bother me. But a couple weeks later, at his 2-month-old checkup, I pointed it out to the pediatrician, who mentioned something about it potentially being neurofibromatosis. Her words fell on deaf ears. I was still wrangling children. It was 2 days after the Sandy Hook shooting, and that school was 3 miles from my home. I was happy to have my children in my arms. She could have told me that my son was going to have monkeys fly out of his ears, and I would have been okay with it. 2 months later, when he was 4 months old, we were at a geneticist, and reality hit me like a freight train. He was clinically diagnosed with neurofibromatosis. It was a term my husband and I had never heard. All we knew was that it causes tumors to grow on nerves throughout the body. We were told that symptoms can range from mild to fatal, that there was no way to predict a prognosis of where my son would fall on that chart, super comforting, and that it affects everyone differently. It can also cause blindness, deafness, bone deformities, learning disabilities, and certainly cancer. As any responsible parent, my first question was, well, what do we do? What's our plan of action here, Doc? And he said, nothing. There is nothing you can do. Just watch and wait. Don't Google it. Ladies and gentlemen, I did not make it to the elevator before I had my Safari up trying to figure out how to spell neurofibromatosis. But what I Googled didn't give me any additional information that the doctor hadn't already told me. So for the next 12 years, that's what we did. We went to quarterly MRIs. We watched new tumors grow. We waited to see if old tumors became unmanageable. And we fought. We connected with the nonprofit called Children's Tumor Foundation. I was not going to let my child go down without a fight. And we raised funds. Where the medical community had failed us, we felt that research was our only blind faith hope for something to save my son's life. We raised funds running road races, we hosted golf tournaments, we hosted pie eating contests, we hosted local bands at local pubs. We came here during Rare Disease Week to Washington, D.C. to tell our story. We met with mayors across the state to find proclamations to raise awareness on what NF is. We lit up buildings across the country, blue and green, to advocate for neurofibromatosis. And we went to the local schools and taught other kids what neurofibromatosis might be, what children with tumors are, and how we're not contagious, and how to deter bullying. And in 2020, that blind faith became tangible hope. While the rest of the country was hoarding toilet paper, our family fixed our eyes on the FDA, who approved the first ever drug, selumetinib, to treat plexiform neurofibromas, which was the cantaloupe-sized tumor in my son's back. It was approved for pediatrics, and it opened the floodgates for trials and research across tumor research. Only 5 years later, earlier this year, a second drug was approved, not only to treat children, but also in adults. It was the first ever drug approved in Europe. My son started that drug in July, and the changes have been astronomical. He ran cross country. He's playing basketball. And what research gave us that we could not was confidence in my child. He no longer has random shooting, radiating pains happening spontaneously throughout the day. He's able to lay on his back for the first time that he can remember in his child life. So my ask today is quite simple. Increase funding to NCI and NIH. expand Orphan Drug Act support, and sustain funding for trials and programs. Selumetinib and mirdametinib were both orphan drugs collecting dust on a shelf. They were pulled off thanks to funding from federal funding and private funding. My son doesn't need a miracle. These kids, their stories don't need to be marked by fear. They can be marked by progress, by possibility, and it hinges on what you all do today. Thank you.
Really terrific story. Thanks, Diane, for sharing that. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jamie Perrier, mom of Tyler. Tyler is a 15-year-old 10th grader and an aspiring actor who was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia at age 14 during the height of the pandemic. His resilience has inspired his entire community. Many even shaved their heads in solidarity for Tyler, so we're interested in hearing more about his story. Jamie, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on an issue that strikes so close to home. Today, I ask you to help the children of this country who cannot stand here before you because they are fighting this horrible battle. I ask you to fully fund and strengthen our national commitment to help end pediatric cancer. Every day, 43 families in America hear the words no parent should ever have to hear, "Your child has cancer." We were one of those families last year. Our children deserve more federal cancer research funding. No child should have to face this battle with outdated or insufficient treatments. Tyler, our son, health challenges began when he was just 16 months old. He was a perfect, healthy toddler, which changed overnight. He was admitted to the hospital in Rhode Island with complete organ failure. Doctors quickly started treatment for HLH, which is a rare blood disorder. He was treated with aggressive chemotherapy and steroids. We found out shortly that his only hope for survival was a bone marrow transplant. So shy of 2 years old, I picked him up and brought him to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, the world's leading hospital for HLH, where we were there for almost 1 year. Cameron, his brother, was only 6 weeks old when he got sick. In and out of the hospital for years, about 4.5, with other health complications. It was a pretty rough road. Fast forward to Tyler at 14 years old, going to school and thriving. We were hit with more devastating news. Your son has a rare form of leukemia, which stemmed from his first bone marrow transplant. For families like mine, we were so lucky to be able to enroll Tyler in a clinical research trial for pediatric leukemia this past year at Dana-Farber. This was Tyler's only hope for survival. He wasn't responding to standard treatments. The new medicine, a new class of drug called menin inhibitors, Tyler's was the first federal FDA-approved medicine. There are now several different menin inhibitors being used today across the world. The American Association for Cancer Research has been instrumental in pushing science forward by funding, publishing data, supporting scientists and doctors who help with future treatments. The AACR cannot fund all new research alone, and they need your help. They have made pediatric cancer a priority, and so should you. They help to develop new medicine that are safer, more effective, and tailored specifically to children. Cancer affects children differently than adults. Their cancers are biologically different, and so should their treatments. In today's world, there are so many new breakthroughs in treatments. Federal funding will help turn these state-of-the-art treatments into potential cures that all children should be able to have. Yet, pediatric cancer still only receives a very small amount of available funding for cancer research. Seems pretty unfair. Children deserve more of the same options and treatments as the adult oncology world. Investing in pediatric cancer research is not only a moral responsibility, but it's an investment in the future of this country. These children are the future of America, and they all need your help. I am asking you today to give the children a chance at life with treatments that are safer for them, increase federal funding, and help support clinical new trials. Thank you for listening and for caring about the children and families who depend on your leadership the most. Have a great afternoon, and here is my son Tyler to say a few words.
Hello, members of Congress. Thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Tyler, and I had a rare form of leukemia. I have battled health issues my entire life. Most kids my age worry about homework and sports. I had to worry about needles, doctor's appointments, and whether the treatment would work. When I was diagnosed at 14 years old with cancer, my entire world changed. I had to miss my entire first year of high school, my friends, holidays, and simple things like going outside. However, the clinical research trial I was enrolled in at Dana-Farber gave me hope. That trial saved my life. It gave me a chance that some kids never got. I learned about the trial because of people who care about kids like me, organizations like the AACR. The AACR helps fund new ideas, new medicine, new ways to fight cancer, like the one I had. Only a very small amount of cancer research goes toward childhood cancers, but without funding, doctors can't create newer treatments that kids deserve. I'm here today to ask you to help. Please increase funding for pediatric cancer research. More funding means more clinical trials. More trials mean more treatments. And better treatments mean more kids surviving this horrible battle. I am just one kid. There's thousands of kids fighting cancer. Some are holding on to hope for a new treatment, like mine. Kids don't have the power to vote, but I'm asking you to use your power to help. Thank you so much for listening today and for helping children with cancer have a better chance of life. Thank you.
Thanks again for all the inspiring stories from our patients and parents. We do have just a few minutes here at the end for any questions from people in the audience. If you have a question, we just have a microphone that will come around for you, and we're happy to address any questions for the people on the panel.
Thank you very much. I'm Mahin Khatami, immunologist, cancer researcher, and inflammation. Thank you, Dr. Foti, for organizing this, and I think we go way, way, way back. I was at NCI since 1998. I brought our discoveries on the role of inflammation in cancer research when I was back at the University of Pennsylvania, and I had no idea how important and how significant the findings were until I came to NCI. And when I proposed the role of inflammation in cancer research, I was told that inflammation has nothing to do with cancer. I was forced to resign, and then 3 years later, or 4 years later, I remember in 2003, AACR had the first symposium for the role of inflammation in cancer research. So this is a little background. I had to take legal actions, and I won multiple times against members of NCI, which I don't see them here. But the point that I want to make for a constructive science, the truth in science, is that in the last few years, I've been working on a formula, cancer risk index, which I developed many years ago, and I wanted to know whether there is any interest to actually progress significantly again against cancer, or are we going to, from 1902, that the AACR, or 1937, that NCI was established, are we going to increase the complexity of cancer, which is not that complex?
So
we have been working
if I could
on,
just, sorry, we
this
were
is-
hoping to get questions around pediatric
that's
cancer. I
what I
think
was
inflammation doesn't really
proposing.
have a lot to do with regard to
That's-
pediatric cancer.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I was proposing.
right.
For
But
the
this
children,
is not sounding like a question,
for
madam.
the children cancer.
Sorry, it's not sounding, maybe
I
we can
realize
talk
that.
about it after the press conference is
For
over with.
children, we are seeing the features of age-associated diseases in children. There is a reason for it.
Perhaps so. I think there's a lot of research in that regard. Thanks for your comments. There is a question online.
Yes, thank you. We have two questions from viewers of the live stream for the researchers on the panel. The first question is, what are some promising new treatments in neuroblastoma and DIPG?
Kim.
So that, can you hear me? Yeah. So that's a great question. So the question was, what are new promising treatments in neuroblastoma and DIPG? And so, you know, I think there's been a lot of research in this area, and we talked a little bit about this press conference about the possibilities of immunotherapy. And one of those immunotherapies we talked about for neuroblastoma was a medicine that's an antibody-based medicine that attracts immune cells to the neuroblastoma to destroy the neuroblastoma cells. And this particular antibody targets a molecule expressed on the surface of neuroblastoma cells called GD2. And so in addition to antibodies, which has been very exciting, the idea of combining antibodies with chemotherapy has really been very important for a number of children with neuroblastoma. And now there are also cellular therapies, CAR T therapies, that target that same GD2. So it was also found that GD2 is highly expressed on diffuse midline gliomas, and there's a lot of excitement now about applying those CAR T strategies to DMG. So that's just one example of many of things that we're very excited about in pediatric oncology for both neuroblastoma and DMG. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. The next question is, what are some of the innovative ways to conduct pediatric cancer clinical trials so that promising new treatments can reach patients faster?
I think one aspect of clinical trials that has changed dramatically is the expansion of clinical trials from just within the United States to international focus. This really addresses the rarity of the cancers where patients across the world can, in many cases, can have access to clinical trial enrollment. And this allows patients to accrue faster to the trials so that we can understand whether the drugs are working or not, and also enhances the ancestral diversity of patients that are taking part in those clinical trials. There are some new adaptive clinical trial designs as well. In addition, decreasing the number of patients required for phase 1 and phase 2A clinical trials is an important development that also speaks to the challenges of accruing sufficient numbers of patients in these early phases so that we can really evaluate the dosage requirements and whether there seems to be any effective aspect to the therapy. So those are some specific examples that come to my mind. Okay, terrific. Well, we've had an amazing afternoon together. I really want to thank everybody present in person and online for their participation. Really thank all of the speakers today and to the families who shared their amazing stories with us and with everyone who's going to read the Pediatric Cancer Progress Report. It really brings into sharp focus why this work matters and why our progress cannot slow down. This inaugural report shows what becomes possible when our nation invests in science. It highlights discoveries that are transitioning outcomes for many young patients and the dedicated work of clinicians and researchers and advocates who are driving these advances forward. It also makes clear where the progress remains uneven and where the urgent needs persist. Far too many rare and aggressive pediatric cancers continue to face serious continue to lack effective treatments, and the survivors of cancer face serious long-term effects. And families in many communities still encounter barriers to timely diagnosis, access, and care, including enrollment onto clinical trials. Addressing these realities is going to require continued commitment. Even so, the future holds extraordinary opportunities. The tools of modern science are stronger than ever, and the knowledge needed to change the trajectory of the most difficult pediatric cancers is within reach. Achieving that progress depends on our ability to sustain the momentum that has brought us to this point and to invoke broad data sharing across the enterprise of pediatric cancer research. We also want to acknowledge the decades of Congress's bipartisan commitment to supporting the National Institutes of Health and the National Cancer Institute. And this commitment has really made the advances like those we highlighted today possible. We want to continue that work together to ensure that every child and adolescent with cancer can benefit from the full promise of scientific progress. We also intend to continue this online discussion around pediatric cancer challenges. So AACR will support an online discussion in the near future that allows everyone to weigh in their experiences, their questions, their concerns, their ideas. So on behalf of the American Association for Cancer Research, we really want to thank you for being here this afternoon and for your dedication to the future of cancer research. Together, we can build on the progress reflected in this report and ensure that every child facing cancer has access to the discoveries and the hope that they deserve. Thanks so much.